We've got the agenda.
We're generous.
Is there anything else? Is there anything else? Just discussion. Oh, no, that's my own. Yeah. Okay.
It's only 6:44, but what the heck? Let's start. Call to order the meeting of the Board of Managers of the Nehawk Creek Watershed District on August 10th, 2017. May I?
Sure.
All managers are present except Manager Loftus. No members of the public, and may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The technician was here yesterday, and the mic sounds louder. Under information items, we have a memo.
The technician was here.
We have a memorandum concerning the building landscape improvements that Florida Nanchich and Darren Lochner are working on. They did a great job of pulling together a plan for us and staff time involved, and thank you very much for that. Our correspondence this week is from the city of Orono. There's a letter with a resolution notifying us that they have established a Carmen Bay Lake Improvement District, and they've sent us a copy for the record, so I'll give that to the administrator. On the consent agenda, we have approval of the July 27, 2017 board minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Under board updates, I'll start. I attended the Policy Advisory Committee meeting for the comp plan earlier this week, and it was a series of meetings that Becky was holding. I think these were the last of the public meetings. It was thinly attended because most of the people were going to be at the Thursday meeting, but good presentation by Becky as usual. Then I attended the CAC meeting last night. There were reports from our staff, including 50th anniversary events, Watershed Heroes recommendations, comp plan update, and the resolution of support came from the CAC. An update on 6 Mile Halsted as it moves toward implementation. Announcements of the upcoming events. There's ribbon cutting for the new boardwalk and trail on the 29th of August. And on the 24th, there are 2 events of interest, a Cottageville Park event where the video about Cottageville Park is being shown. And that's on the website. Have you ever looked at it? Yeah, it's good. Really nice story. Also on that day, Master Naturalist Prairie Walk out in Atrista, and led by a Master Naturalist named Darren Lochner. On 8/19, it's the 50th anniversary event, Canoes for a Cause, Hiawatha Cleanup, and the Master Water Stewards kickoff will be in October. And just as a reminder, the next 4 meetings, the assigned liaison board member are Manager Olson, Manager Loftus, Manager Becker, and Manager Miller for September through December. The Operations and Programs Committee met earlier this week. Manager Loftus is not here, but Manager Olson, can you give us a report?
Okay, the Operations and Programs Committee, we met Monday afternoon, and the entire staff was gathered in the room here, and the recommendations on their part of how they saw the organization changes that would be needed to really optimize the watershed operating system would be, were asked of them, and they put it all on paper, and then Manager Loftus read every one of the recommendations back to the group, and so that it was clearly understood where everybody's opinion was, and it was very well done. And then she gathered all that information, and she's going to take the recommendations from the consultant as well as the recommendations from the committee and the recommendations from staff and come up with a couple of choices as to an organization that we can discuss and vote on in the next meeting.
Thank you. There was a joint committee meeting earlier this evening to look at the work plans from planning and programs and from education and education. Very well done, and we will come back to the remaining work plans at our next meeting and then be ready to accept them all at one time. There was also a presentation about an upcoming conservation easement opportunity. The upcoming meeting and event schedule lists meetings for August and September, but add to that the CAC is meeting on September 13th, and Manager Olson is the liaison for that meeting. Item 11.1, Resolution 17-048, authorization to sign a subordination of mortgage for the Painter Marsh easements. Ms. Clark.
Chair White, managers, the district's work in the Painter Creek subwatershed has been highlighted in several presentations recently, so I won't go into details, but the area of the subject action is on the northern part of Painter Marsh, as shown on the attached plan. Here's a close-up of Painter Marsh, and you'll see the red and blue lines around the marsh, which represent existing and proposed flowage easements that are necessary to facilitate future planned work with the Army Corps of Engineers. The subject property, again, is in the southern portion of the marsh. In 2008, as part of the district's land conservation program, the district purchased the highlighted 22 acres on Painter Marsh, which included a 22-horse stable, single-family home, shed, a hay shed, and an outdoor riding arena. The district demoed the residence and outbuildings, and then in 2013 sold 5 acres, including the stable, to the adjoining property of Minnetonka Apple Orchards. With this transaction, we conveyed 5.2 acres with the stable for a sale price of $413,568. As part of that, we hold a conservation easement across the northern part of the 5 acres for conservation and flowage, and we hold an access easement across that property for future access, as well as access within the stable, which is planned and was contemplated at the time of the sale to be converted to an event center and winery. So that access to the building is for educational purposes, as we would like to coordinate with the landowner. Also, as part of that transaction, the district holds a promissory note secured by a mortgage filed against the orchard property for the original amount of $316,000, which is at about $310,000 today. Currently, Mr. Shopper, the owner of Minnetonka Orchards, is securing new debt for the expansion of their business, and his lender has requested the district to subordinate our mortgage and note to this new debt as part of the transaction. When we took the initial mortgage in 2013, this was this business plan and new debt was contemplated and written into the mortgage agreement. So the action before you, staff, is coordinated with our real estate counsel and general counsel, Mr. Holtman. And based on our understanding of the assets, partially demonstrated by an appraisal as well as comparable property values, the district believes that our mortgage is still adequately covered with this subordination. In addition to the subordination agreement, it also includes a revision to the existing note and mortgage, which accelerates the maturity date of that note by 10 years and accelerates the payment schedule. Mr. Shopper has also agreed to grant the district an expansion of our easement rights on his property. to include the northern portion, not part of the subject 5 acres that were sold, to extend our flowage rights, facilitating the contemplated restoration work with the Corps of Engineers. So the action before you to...
Excuse me, could you just point it out, what the additional easement we have?
So the additional easement is the blue line about 1.4 acres over wetland area that is contiguous to Painter Marsh. And a slight expansion of our easement rights on the 5 acres that we sold.
Okay.
And those rights are to facilitate the contemplated work with the Corps of Engineers.
One other question. We've got a contract for deed, so to speak, for the land, right?
Well,
We have a
Mortgage.
conventional note with a mortgage.
Okay, and this additional loan is for what purpose?
For expansion of the winery and event center business. So the investment, much of the investment of the new debt will be in the facility.
But it's for some unrelated to the building. It's a business improvement of some kind.
Business improvement, it's broken out into several different categories. There's operating expenses and upgrades to the existing facility for converting it to an event center and winery business.
Okay, so there's how big is the new loan?
The new loan is about $837,000, I believe.
And how much of that is for building improvements versus business
right.
activity?
Roughly half.
Okay.
There's roughly half. Part of it's operating loans on some separate terms, and then partly is investments.
We're not getting a very good deal if we're giving them operating loan and subordinating our, I can see where if they were putting all of it into the building, there's value there, I suppose, but we're subordinated. But when he's getting operating money and we're subordinating to that too, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. This is,
And just the original debt was, our original note and mortgage was subordinate to operating loans initially. So those operating loans are part of this, are being satisfied and rolled into the new debt for building improvements.
I have a question that's more of a general question about, and I'm not sure who can answer it, about how many promissory notes we issued.
it's only one.
This is the only one?
The reason we did that is because the building was looked to as an asset, and it was going to cost us more to tear it down than the value generated, and we could satisfy, put it back in the tax rolls. It was kind of a combination of things, and I don't know why he couldn't get a private mortgage, but anyhow, he couldn't, and we carried the paper. So it's on the tax rolls, and we didn't have to tear it down. I guess that was the benefit we got.
I'm glad to hear it's the only one.
Yeah. No, and it's kind of a community asset kind of thing with a orchard and activity center and a vineyard or winery or whatever it's called, but the bank's got the better part of the deal on the thing.
From the description of the situation, it sounded to me like we anticipated something like this happening when we got into the original deal. So I think it's, from my point of view, important to keep our promise, so to speak, and follow through as long as the financing is reasonable.
Did I hear you correctly when you said original 316?
Correct. The,
Down to 310, he's only paid off $6,000
correct.
in all these years?
In, yes, 4 years.
Very, very favorable terms we gave him.
Okay.
So that's, managers, I think part of what's good for the district in the transaction is that we are accelerating the maturity date of our original agreement and accelerating those payments, and then also getting needed easements to support future work.
Is there more that you want to present, Ms. Clark? Okay, other questions? Is there a motion? Then, let me just make sure I understood. We'll have the same operating money, but they'll also have some building, which will increase the value of the property? No.
Is your question about the difference in the debt ahead of our mortgage?
Mhm.
The difference in that debt is about $500,000. And how the staff worked with councils to evaluate our position in that change was reviewing an appraisal that they submitted that was for the property, an evaluation of crop and other assets that the bank used, and then a comparable property value all went into the assessment of the security of the district's note in bringing this decision to you.
What would happen if we didn't agree to do this?
The district is in somewhat of a position to approve the request because the way it was written into the mortgage. So I think that council might recommend that we're not in a strong position to negotiate against providing that. I think that the package before you that provides that offsets or somewhat minimalizes the risk is the accelerated repayment of the mortgage and payments for that. And then, yeah, just to say that the risk of our note was evaluated based on some of those facts.
Mr. Holt?
I'll move approval on it, and I'll explain why, if I get a second.
Is there a second?
Second.
I think we're getting value with the additional easement. And that project in Painter's Marsh could be quite extensive, and I probably need it. I think if we had torn down that building, it would have been a lot of criticism of it because it had value, and this way it was maintained and improved and is used and paying taxes. I think the general benefit for the community is more. We're not in an ideal situation, but we never were. So I think it's a reasonable, not reasonable, but it's acceptable position to be in, subordinated to the bank. If it were all in improvements, I would feel a lot better, but.
We're in no worse condition.
Well, we're a little 500,000 worse, but.
Okay.
But the value has gone up in the meanwhile, and they've made improvements, and it's an operating business. So I think we got to take all that into account. That it's just not a static building; it's a business operation, so it's got more value now.
Thank you, Manager Olson.
Two questions. Did the petting zoo ever exist? That it was originally going to be used for?
Manager Olson, managers, the restrictive covenants when we sold the barn limited the number of animal units, and there's a calculation in those covenants for that. I don't believe, besides 2 horses, other animals have really been housed in the stable. Just from my personal knowledge of the operation, they have a petting zoo, but I don't think it involves the stable. There's another barn for that, so the facility hasn't really been used to support animals. And in my last walk through the building, it actually has been cleared of all the horse paddocks and a new cement floor poured, and so there's been investments of approximately $50,000, I'm told.
But they have been keeping 2 horses there.
There were 2 horses there on my last visit, and it sounded like one was his granddaughter's and her friends, and they were on their way out. They're allowed up to 5 horses or animal equivalents.
Okay.
But the green space and the way it was supposed to be kept has been maintained.
As I saw the horse trailers parked out front as I drove past last week, so I was curious as to how many were there. Thank you.
One other
Manager
question. How do we delineate the new easement? Is it going to be marked?
We actually are having it marked in the field tomorrow. It's delineated on a survey and by legal description, which will be included in the easement. And those boundaries are based on modeling data from the Corps of Engineers feasibility study.
Okay.
Other questions? Are we ready to vote? All
I
those
have
in?
a question.
Becker.
You mentioned that we're in a tough position to not approve the subordination. Can you speak to that with a little more detail? Is the position that we would subordinate in writing in the original note?
Manager Becker, managers, I can defer to council, but
That's
yes,
fine.
in the mortgage. It says that
It's
in the mortgage.
That's what I wanted to know.
All those in, Mr. Wesker? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 11.2. Ms. Benoit. Resolution 17049, approval of the 2017 Watershed Heroes Awards recipients.
President White, managers, I'm here before you with a resolution of approval of the 2017 Watershed Heroes Awards recipients, and I'm asking for final approval tonight of this list. To refresh your memory, I was back here in June asking approval of a restructured Watershed Heroes Awards slate or program, if you will, modeling them after the guiding principles of the district. So we have 5 awards for partnership, innovation, excellence, sound science, and service as a result of that board action back in June, as well as a Young Naturalist Award and a Lifetime Stewardship Award named after Cynthia Krieg. A news release was issued in June after that favorable board action, and seeking nominations from the public, also soliciting nominations internally from staff, board, and CAC here at the district. Staff did an initial review of the nominations that were received on July 19th and prepared some comments for the subcommittee that was convened on July 25th to consider. And that subcommittee consisted of several staff as well as CAC members and Board President Sherry White. The subcommittee on July 25th had a very lengthy, I thought, pretty good discussion on all of the nominations and came up with a list to recommend to the Planning and Policy Committee, which met on July 27th. And there was support for that list of bringing it forward here to the board for final action tonight. And so we did receive 16 total nominations, and 7 of them were externally submitted, 9 were internally submitted. And the recommended recipients for 2017's Watershed Heroes Awards are, for the Partnership Award, Japs Olson Company; for its commitment to partnership in achieving an environmentally friendly expansion of its business that was the culmination of several years of work with the district. The Innovation Award, Lennar Corporation, for its hard work and creative spirit in its pursuit of a 99-unit residential development in Victoria. The project will restore 12 acres and permanently protect 23.5 acres of public water wetland, which is beyond Lennar's regulatory obligation. The Excellence Award, Park Nicollet, for its leadership and vision in improving Minnehaha Creek, which sparked the creation of the Minnehaha Creek Greenway. Its commitment continued in 2017 with the construction of a flood wall that resulted in a 6-acre wetland restoration. The Sound Science Award, Dr. Peter Sorensen, University of Minnesota, for his commitment to researching common carp's impact on our water resources and developing an integrated protocol to sustainably control common carp in a system. The Service Award, the Minneapolis Area Synod of the ELCA, for their collective achievement in engaging a broad network of congregations in the watershed to increase awareness of water quality issues and spark stewardship of the natural resources in their communities. The Young Naturalist Award, the Blake School of 4th grade class, for their creativity and enthusiasm in learning about the importance of our water resources and how to protect them from stormwater runoff. Their projects included creating 3D models, which they brought here to a Board of Managers meeting, cleanups along the creek, as well as tours and cleanups of nearby storm drains. Their efforts serve as a role model for experiential learning across the watershed. And the Cynthia Krieg Lifetime Stewardship Award, Peggy Knapp, for her dedication to protecting water resources, which has had a lasting impact on lakes, rivers, and streams and wetlands across the region and the state. She implemented a number of programs, including founding the Master Water Stewards Program, which has trained more than 100 residents of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District in water resource protection and advocacy. Knapp retired from the Freshwater Society just this year in June. So that is the recommended slate of award recipients before you. If approved tonight, they will be given their awards at our Sunset Celebration on Thursday, November 2nd. At St. Mary's Lake Calhoun Event Center, which is the concluding event in our 50th anniversary event series. So I ask you tonight for final approval of these awards so that we can send out the invitations soon after. Thank you.
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Fine, well,
There's a board discussion item, 12.1, a Big Island Conservation Easement and Planning. Mr. Goodall.
Thank you, President White and managers. At our last meeting, we had some resident comments that regarding the Big Island Planning Committee with the City of Orono and also our conservation easement. And as a follow-up to that, the board asked our legal counsel to kind of review options for sharing or transferring part or whole of our conservation easement to another nonprofit as a way to strengthen our position to maintain the ecological integrity of this property long term. There's a memo that was emailed to all of you earlier this week, but also before you today, and also will be part of the board packet from our legal counsel outlining that process and procedure for doing that. And I'm happy to update you on some other recent conversations with Big Island too, or unless you wanted to talk about the easement transfer process
I'd
first.
be interested in hearing your.
Okay, in the last couple of weeks, I've had a lot of conversations and meetings about Big Island. I've met with our CAC member who serves on that committee, and also had conversations with Gabriel Jabor, with a separate meeting with the council member from Orono who is leading the Big Island Committee and one of the committee members. And then Renee Clark and I met with the Big Island Planning Committee this past Tuesday afternoon. So we've had a lot of opportunities to kind of touch base on this. We shared information about our district's past investment and involvement in the property, our ongoing interest to make sure that any changes to the property protect the conservation values that are defined in the conservation easement. And I think that's been pretty clear that the easement restricts a lot of uses. silverfish or something in the studio, the basement studio. And also looking at ways to promote activities out there that are passive, low impact, non-motorized, and don't have a negative impact on the ecological integrity of the property. The Orono Planning Committee has done one cleanup day earlier this summer, and they plan to do 2 more this fall. We talked, when Renee and I met with them, we talked about maybe trying to provide a little bit more coordination or guidance to make that a little bit more of a directed process and to have a better impact for what they're trying to do there. They also have a current pending request. They'd like to place a storage container to have equipment there for trail maintenance. So that's in process from Orono City staff. And longer term, their main focus right now is maintaining trails, fixing up an existing somewhat dilapidated structure to use as a visitor center, and then longer term to do some historical and nature education programming. In all of the activities, we've kind of stressed our value and our responsibility to enforce the obligations of the conservation easement. And then to look for ways to continue to communicate and coordinate efforts with the city of Orono. Just like encourage all folks to come to us earlier rather than later so that we can have a positive impact on their planning process. And I think that's taking place now. And just in terms of the frequency of our staff, we have staff that inspect and observe things out on the property at least once a year. In practical purposes, it's usually more than that because I know that some of our staff were out there just a few weeks ago. So that it kind of happens opportunistically more frequently, but at least a minimum of once a year, which is, I believe, the standard process to monitor and enforce a conservation easement from other organizations that would do that too.
I'd like to explore.
I'm sorry, I just recognized Commander Shepard.
Oh, I didn't wear my hearing aids today, so probably missing a lot.
Microphone.
Sorry, thank you. There was the concept of events or of a wedding happening on the island was brought up, and not being an attorney, looking at this, there's a restriction on events. No organized events may take place which could impair the conservation values of the protected property. And I don't know what was discussed with the city in terms of their hopes and desires and goals for the property use.
They kind of expressed their interest to have maybe some increased level of use for education purposes, but not for events. I think the event that was out there referenced was certainly not permitted by any organization or entity. And typically those types of things for enforcement are left to the local law enforcement, so on a kind of reported basis. So some of those things, it's hard to enforce that. I think that's the case with a lot of conservation properties, that it's opportunistic to enforce those types of things.
Sure. I guess my initial thought was, without a doubt, in terms of the responding to the opportunistic actions as opposed to programming that is kind of
right.
thought through. The structure, going from one section to another section, there was something in this about structures not being allowed unless for specific purposes that again would not jeopardize something.
Yeah, I think there was some ambiguity or questions about whether our conservation easement applied to the whole property or not, and I think we reiterated that it does indeed apply to the whole property. There are two different categories of space or areas out there. There's recreational areas and natural areas, but our easement applies to both. there's slightly different rules and obligations in terms of the allowable uses and prohibited uses. There is, I think, a clause in the easement that allows them to upkeep existing structures and even to construct structures as long as we're involved in the process to help make sure those are done in a way that don't violate the conservation values of the easement.
Well, my position is that this doesn't belong to Orno. It's a district-wide asset in which they're the custodians of it at best, I would say, because the state of Minnesota put money in it, we put money in it, and the city put money in it, but it's not a local park. It's a resource that belongs to everybody in the watershed district, if not in the state. And I'd like to explore the idea, because I don't want to be dealing with this on a regular basis, and I don't want to be the cop on it. What I'd like to do is explore the idea of employing the Minnesota Land Trust as to enforce to monitor and enforce our easements, because they're experts at this kind of thing, and they own a lot of land in around the lake, and it could be one of their regular assignments, and we should see if they'd be willing to take this on a contractual basis, because apparently we can't assign the easement without some procedures that we probably don't want to go through. But to make sure that there's a third party in it and we don't get involved in fighting with one of our constituent cities over enforcement of the terms of the conservation easement.
How do we know if maintenance or if a creation of a new trail is taking place? Are they obligated to notify us?
They're required to make notification to any changes in trails, and any changes to trails can't expand the width or add new trails without having prior permission. And even the maintenance of those are kind of restricted in terms of how they do that. The conservation easement does spell out if there's any kind of surfaces for accessibility issues, that crushed limestone surface, and so it has some of those details in there as well, and not paved surfaces. But there is an advanced notification process to make any changes to trails or structures or vegetation management and all those different types of things that need to be coordinated by and with the district.
Manager Becker?
To Manager Olson's point, the Land Trust Alliance sets out procedures that a land trust holder should go through, and annual or similar periodic inspections are one of the things that they recommend and require if you're to be a certified trust holder.
To that point, I'll second Manager Miller's motion.
Here are some of the issues that I've been thinking about. Besides the easement, there's a maintenance plan that the district signed off on. And under that maintenance plan, there are requirements for using the Orno ordinances concerning events and park use. So that's something we want to look at more carefully. Lost my train of thought. I'm reminded, though, of stories a friend of mine told me about his family co-owning a lake cottage with a family. And there was always something. It was the hot water heater died, and why didn't you tell us you were there last week? And let's replace the dock, and oh no, not yet. And so I think we'd want to be really careful if we did go the route of trying to share the easement in some fashion.
Well, we wouldn't share it. They would just be enforcing our easement, and they're more responsible and experienced than my brother-in-law owning my cabin with me about maintenance of.
Shooting down my example.
Well, it was pretty good, but he left herself open.
Mr. Holden.
Excuse me, just for procedural clarity, Manager Shackleton seconded Manager Miller's motion, which I'm not sure I heard quite as a motion, but could you articulate?
It's explore the possibility of, with Minnesota Land Trust, for them enforcing the obligations under our easement.
Contracting with.
Right, because we can't assign. Or there doesn't look like there's likelihood of ours being able to assign our easement.
Manager Becker?
Are members aware that this is probably an expense, that they will require a sum of money that throws off the annual inspection
Mhm.
costs?
Also, although we've heard ideas, and the ideas have evolved and changed, and the list has grown and shrunk, we haven't had, that committee hasn't come to any conclusion, their council hasn't come to any conclusion. And so I hate to react to something that might not happen.
We're just gathering information.
That's
Only an idea.
exploring, that's all.
Yeah,
I think it wasn't direction to execute, it was direction to
explore,
refine,
exactly.
refine the memo.
Mr. Riddle.
As perhaps as an add-on to that, or maybe this would be part of the exploration anyway, would you like us to kind of compare the services that we'd be able to contract for versus the services our staff already provides?
No, because the purpose of this is get us out of it,
Just
and
okay.
so that it doesn't become a point of conflict with us. That some expert, third-party, experienced group that literally no one can challenge because of their credibility, that we're not subject to all the conflicts that we would be.
They're not any third party.
No, they're not just any third party.
Just any third party.
They're the third party, I would guess, as far as my knowledge is.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I see no harm in exploring the option. Before I turn it over to you for your report, I just wanted to add something I forgot to mention in discussing the joint committees earlier, and that is that this is the first set of work plans under the new strategic direction. So it was a little different approach and very refreshing. Mr. Erdahl.
Thank you, President White. Just a few quick updates as far as an administrator's report. A couple things from our planning staff at Cottageville Park. CenterPoint Energy will begin their gas line work this next Monday, and that work will take about 3 weeks. That has come before the board in a couple meetings ago, I believe. Also, just a little bit of an update on Arden Park at their council meeting this city on the 2nd of August. This Edina City Council voted to delay the action to approve the next phase and to hold a public hearing. They heard a robust presentation from our staff about the project, and the public hearing will be on September 6th. That will include kind of a shortened version of the presentation provided by our staff, and scheduled to then discuss and take action on Tuesday, September 19th. That's their current timeline for that. And then also, as and maybe, I don't know if staff have any additional background, but at its meeting yesterday evening, the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board voted to make some changes in terms of their pumping of groundwater at Lake Hiawatha. So that was an article in the paper this morning about making those changes effective after the Gulf season of 2019.
19.
Right. And then just lastly, President White already mentioned, but there was quite a few meetings this week related to the comprehensive plan for the policy advisory group, the technical advisory group, and then kind of a third catch-all for those that either couldn't make one of those meetings or weren't on either of those groups. And Becky and our staff has done a great job putting that together. And also, I think the level of public engagement throughout has been really gratifying, and the participants have been very supportive because they have been so engaged in the process. And that's about a month more to go in the public comment period that ends on September 5th, after which time the staff will collect and make responses to all of the comments received, and then have a public hearing before that thing goes in for review by Bowser. So, and that's all I have.
All right. The meeting is adjourned.
I'd like to